Today we're going to make the snoozy pillowcase from the 4-H Steam 1 Maker's Guide. This pillowcase uses the Burrito method, which means it's just kind of a neat way of folding it while you're working so that it turns out easily without any frayed seams on the inside. We're also going to be using the French seam in this project. So the things you need to have are 7/8 of a yard of a non-directional print. This is a non-directional print, and that just means that the fabric has a picture on it that doesn't end up upside down no matter which way you use it. So if I were to use this one, this is a directional print because the elephants would actually be upside down for part of the project if I used it. So that's why we're not going to use a directional print. We're going to use a non-directional print like this. Okay, and then you need 1/3 of a yard of another accent fabric for the hem of the pillowcase, which is going to be right here, this wider part. And you also need 1/8 of a yard of a fabric that you want to be this trim piece right here. So what we're going to do now is we are going to use our tailor's chalk. If you don't have tailor's chalk that shows up on the fabric colors that you've chosen, you could also use these friction pens. There's a few different types, and these erase when the heat of the iron touches them. So that's another option. I think we'll be able to see okay if we use tailor's chalk the entire time on these colors. So we're just going to use tailor's chalk. If your tailor's chalk is kind of dull on the edges, you can take a closed pair of scissors and just kind of sharpen the edges here like this. And then that gives you a nice clean edge to mark with. Okay, so then what you want to do is straighten your fabric pieces. So when you get your fabric off the bolt, it usually has a crease on it on the fold, but that's not usually straight with the grain. And so if you cut with that fold being your straight of the grain, your project might actually kind of twist and turn as you use it. So we want to make ours nice and straight with the grain. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the salvage edge, which is the edge that the loom was hanging onto when it was in the weaving process. And you can usually see these little tiny holes where the loom was sort of holding on. So if you want to take those two sides of your fabric and you sort of line them up and you kind of shake it a little bit here, and then if you look, the fold now is straight and it's not twisted looking like this. So we want it to be nice and straight. And then you'll take it to the iron and make sure that fold is nice and sharp. I already did that with these other pieces though. So what we're going to do first is mark our fabric. So we need to cut out and mark a piece that is 26 inches long by 46 inches wide. So that is going to be the main fabric of the pillow. I have my fabric laid so that it's fold side nearest me and salvage edge is over here. Okay, so I'm going to take my grid ruler and my tape measure. So fabric, when it comes off the bolt, this type of cotton fabric is 45 inches wide when you buy it off the bolt. So if it's folded in half, that means it's 22 1/2 inch wide this direction from fold to salvage. So if we don't want to unfold our fabric all the way and we want to keep it simpler and keep it folded, what we want to do is measure a distance from the fold toward the salvage at 20 1/2 inches, and that will give us 41 inches wide when we are done with our cutting. So we are going to measure here. This ruler is 18 inches long, but we're going to measure 20 1/2 inches. Just put your mark on your tape measure mark on the fold here, and then make sure your tape measure is straight. And then we're just going to do a couple of little dashed marks here across. So line it up on the 20 1/2 again. Hold it nice and straight. Do another mark. And we're going to do that. We need 26 inches long, so we're going to do it about 28 inches long when we're marking, so that we know we have it far enough over. So another 20 1/2 here from the fold to the selvage. Let's do one more. Okay. So now we're going to use our grid ruler. And if we use these cross lines here on the fold, if we make them exactly parallel to the fold, then our ruler edges are going to be perpendicular to the fold, therefore straight on the grain when we cut it. So we're going to line our ruler up here nice and parallel on this line, and then we're just going to make a nice straight mark across, holding our ruler in the middle. If you don't hold your ruler down, it allows the fabric to shift underneath it, and you might not get an accurate marking. And now we're going to line our ruler up with one of the lines on the selvage, and we're going to finish this line here. Okay, so that straight line, now we can measure from this line to 26 inches long, and that will give us our rectangle. The reason why we're measuring exactly 26 inches on this way, and we're only measuring half of the 41 here, is because this direction the fabric is not folded, so there is no unfolding it to get our full length. But this direction, we will unfold our fabric to get our 41 inches. So that's why we're only marking and cutting 26 inches on this direction. So we're going to do the same thing we did with our 20 1/2. We're going to go line our edge up here on the line that we just marked, and we're going to measure 26 and make some more little short markings. And it's really good to make sure that you have for sure a mark where the corner is going to be, so that you can really make sure that's going to be lined up. Okay, now we need to go through and connect all of our short little markings. So we're going to make sure you put your line parallel to the fold here, and then you line up your little markings. And I see that it's not terribly straight, is it? So that's where your double checking can come in handy here. Okay, and then we're going to go here, and actually the first set of dashed lines is about almost exactly 2 inches from the selvage, so that helps us line it up also, because this ruler is 2 inches wide, so it's pretty easy to line the edge of the ruler up with the line, and it kind of checks out. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but we've got a 26-inch long by 20 1/2 inches rectangle that we will cut out, and it will be our 41 by 26 rectangle that we need for the first piece of fabric here. So I'm going to cut this out. One thing, when you're cutting fabric, you want to make sure that your blade is resting on your work surface, so that you are not changing the shape of the project while you cut, because if you lift it in the air, it's really easy to get an inaccurate marking and cut. So set that one aside. Also, if you make sure that your line that you're cutting on is on this side of your blade, you can really see where you're cutting much better. Long, smooth cuts here. That way you get a much smoother edge on your fabric. And I'm going to turn this around so that I can have my line on the inside of my blade. Sometimes it's easy to hold it like this, kind of with your hand and your index finger. That kind of keeps your fabric from moving around when it's such a narrow little spot here we're trying to cut by. Okay, so if we measured correctly, this is 26 inches long. Okay, by, here's our 20 1/2 inch this direction. And then when we unfold it, we should get our rectangle that's 26 inches. Okay, we'll go under the camera here like this maybe. 26 inches by 41 inches. So that's the first piece we need to cut. I'll just fold that right back up. Okay, and now these pieces, I would just put in my stash for another project. And then this one, you can judge your own stash. Some people, you kind of need to decide what is too small to keep. So that's what I would say for you. Make your own choices that way. This, for me, is too small, so I'm going to throw it away. Okay, the next piece that we need to cut is 41 inches wide again by 11 inches wide. So 41 inches this direction by 11 inches this direction. So I'm going to put the fold nearest myself again. And if you can see, the fabric is not terribly straight on the edges, and that is fine. That's why you kind of want to get a little bit more than the directions call for sometime. But this actually, I think, is about 12 inches. So we have plenty of space to cut our 11 inches and still get a good accurate marking. So if we do the trick again, where we cut at 20 1/2 inches, we will get 41 inches wide. So 20 1/2 inches from the fold. Going to make our marks again. 20 1/2, nice and straight across here. Make sure that the edge of your chalk is on the edge of your tape measure and it's not somewhere near, but not quite exactly. That will give you an inaccurate measurement. Okay, so this is going to be our 41 inches wide. And now I can set this aside and use my grid ruler. This is an 18-inch long grid ruler, and we're going to mark it. We're going to make sure we have a perpendicular marking here. So keep our line parallel again. We're going to mark this. See, if you kind of work down the ruler with your chalk, then you're not kind of bunching up your fabric underneath your ruler, which can lead to as a kind of a inaccurate marking there. Okay, this line might be too far over to get 11 inches from that, so we're just going to have to adjust from that. So here's 11 inches right here. What I'm going to do is mark this middle line in my ruler is 1 inch. So I'm going to put my middle line there, and then I'm going to mark a 1 inch on the other side, because sometimes marking on such a narrow piece, if I would have tried to mark it here, it's hard to kind of stay accurate. So I'm going to just do a little bit of adjusting here. Put my inch line here. Okay, so now I'm going to mark 11 inches from this line across, which is, you probably can't see my ruler very well, so I'll go here with this. So 11 inches is almost the very edge of my fabric. So I need to check now, if I were to cut right here, do I have fabric on the other side? Because sometimes fabric is like this on the back. So you want to make sure that your fabric is exactly lined up so that you do have that 11 inches all the way across. You don't want to be short on part of it. So there's 11, do some marks, little short marks. Okay, and then we're going to connect them with our grid ruler. Parallel line here on the fold. Okay, and now this line here is going to disappear when I iron over it, so you won't even see that line in our finished project. And now we're going to make our line here parallel to that anchor line that we drew, and now we're going to connect our short little lines. Okay, let's cut it out. Remember, your line stays on the inside of your scissor blade so you can see where you're going. Blade, the bottom blade is on the table, and you're making smooth, rhythmic cuts. Make sure you're cutting this line and not this line. Sometimes what you can do is just kind of put an X on the part that you don't want to cut. That way you don't accidentally cut it. Especially if you lay out and mark and then come back another time to cut. Maybe you ran out of time in the first set and you have to come back and cut it later, and then you don't want to accidentally cut on the wrong line. Okay, since this is so narrow again, I like to hold it down with my index finger. This kind of helps it to not move around too much while I'm trying to cut. Okay, and then these scraps can go. You can decide if you're a person that needs to save the narrow pieces or if you want to throw them away. That's your choice. It's your project. So there's our 11 inches wide by 41 inches long piece of pillowcase hem, or the cuff, they kind of call it too in the instructions. Okay, we'll set that one aside, and now we have our 1/8 of a yard that I've already straightened out on with the iron, and we need this one to be 3 inches wide by 41 inches long. So again, we're going to mark 20 1/2 inches from the fold to the selvage in that direction. That'll give us our 41. So 20 1/2 inch right on the fold, and mark. We're not going to be, so this fabric looks like it's only about 44 inches wide in the off the bolt, and that's pretty common also. They say 45 to be kind of general, but it can vary a lot. Okay, and now we're going to be 3 inches wide. So here's a trick. If our ruler is 2 inches wide, we can draw our anchor line here. Okay, perpendicular to the fold, right? Our ruler is going. And then you can line it up, make sure that your marks on your ruler are also parallel to the 20 1/2 inch marks here. Okay, there's our anchor line. And now if we go like this, we can either mark some temporary marks here at 2 inches wide, and then find our middle line and set that on the line that we just drew, and then draw again for a real line that would be 3 inches wide. Or you could put your finger on the 3 inches and mark all the way across. That's personal preference. I kind of like to do this smaller, not quite as bold line in the middle at 2 inches wide. And then I added center, line up that 1 inch mark in the center of your ruler and get 3 inches without too much measuring or effort. So now I'm going to connect these lines. That doesn't look straight. Let's fix that. I'm going to go back to my anchor line here. Not quite straight. This is the time to fix things that aren't quite accurate before you cut, because then if you're not accurate before you cut, your project will not go together correctly and you will be frustrated. So let's cut now. See how far off I was before? So now we're going to cut on the outside lines. You can mark these also as don't cut these if you want. And then we're going to cut this one first so that it does not get forgotten in our brain which line we wanted. Can I go back? When it's so narrow, it's easy to go off the track here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go iron out those 2 lines that we didn't want. But we have 3 inches wide now. It's a little over, isn't it? We got to make this accurate. Okay. 3 inches wide by 41.5 inches long. So these are the 3 pieces then you'll have that will make up your pillowcase. You'll have this main body for your pillow. Okay. And then you'll have this piece will be a little piece of trim and a pop of color right here. And then this will be your hem or your cuff, which will go right here, but it'll actually be folded in half. So it'll actually be this wide. And that's kind of what it'll look like in the end.